Imagine being able to see the future, not metaphorically, not in dreams, but literally, like a movie playing inside your mind. Machines that don't exist yet, technologies decades ahead of their time, mistakes before anyone even makes them. Now imagine you can't turn it off. That's how a man named Nikola Tesla lived. It all began on a night when the sky was being torn apart. July 10th, 1856, a small village hidden in the mountains. The storm was so violent it felt like nature itself had gone mad. Lightning struck relentlessly, lighting up the land in blinding flashes. And in that moment, he was born. According to legend, the midwife, terrified by the storm, whispered, "This child is a child of darkness." But his mother calmly replied, "No, he will be the light." And in that moment, there was more truth than anyone could possibly understand. From early childhood, Tesla was different. While other children ran and played, he could sit still for hours, staring into nothingness. But it wasn't nothing. Inside his mind, something extraordinary was happening. He saw inventions, not as ideas, but as real objects. He could take a machine apart in his mind, rebuild it, test it, and even improve it, without a single drawing, without mistakes, without trial and error. He was building the future inside his head. To others, it seemed strange, sometimes disturbing, sometimes like madness. But that wasn't the real problem. His mind didn't fully obey him. Tesla was haunted by flashes of light, so intense they could completely override reality. Any word, sound, or image could trigger a cascade of visions, as if his brain wasn't just a brain, but a transmitter. He couldn't stop it. And over time, he began to realize not everything he saw belonged to the present. Within that chaos, there was something that kept repeating. Energy, a force no one could control, a force no one fully understood. Electricity. He saw it in the lightning tearing through the sky, in the sparks created by touch, in invisible currents hidden from sight. But to him, it wasn't invisible. It was alive. And perhaps on that very night, among thunder and light, a connection was formed between them. While others saw fear, he saw a system. While others heard chaos, he heard patterns. And one day that boy would prove to the world that lightning is not something to fear. It's something you can control. Sometimes, genius doesn't begin with a discovery. It begins with an obsession. For Nikola Tesla, that's exactly how it happened. After a childhood filled with flashes of light and strange visions, his world didn't become calmer. It became more dangerous, because now he began to understand what he was seeing. Electricity was no longer abstract. It became a problem to solve. Relentless, consuming, impossible to ignore. He enters a technical school, and that's where something happens. Something that breaks the line between an ordinary man and who he is about to become. One day during a lecture, a professor demonstrates a dynamo machine, powered by direct current. Everyone accepts it as fact. Everyone except Tesla. He raises his hand and says it's inefficient, that there must be another way. Better, cleaner, more powerful. The audience laughs. The professor is annoyed. But for Tesla, this is no longer theory. In his mind, an idea begins to take shape. Alternating current, a system where energy doesn't just flow in one direction, but pulses, shifts, breathes, as if nature itself is revealing the answer. And from that moment on, everything changes. He is no longer just a student. He becomes obsessed. He barely sleeps. He can read entire books and remember them word for word. His memory becomes almost superhuman, but the cost is high. With each passing day, his condition grows more unstable. He starts avoiding physical contact, develops a fear of germs, long before it was widely understood, creates strange rituals. For example, he may wash his hands dozens of times in a row, or demand exactly 18 napkins at dinner. Why? Because numbers begin to control him, especially the number 3. 3 steps, 3 repetitions, 3 attempts, as if his mind is searching for order in chaos, or trying to create it. But the most terrifying part isn't the habits. It's what's happening inside his mind. The flashes of light grow stronger, the visions more vivid. Sometimes they are so real he cannot distinguish them from reality. This is no longer imagination. It's something else, and at some point he reaches the edge. Physically, mentally, his body is exhausted, his mind overloaded, and it feels like just a little more, and he will break. Forever. But at that exact moment, something happens. Something that changes everything. During a walk, drained and on the verge of collapse, he suddenly stops. The idea comes instantly, clear, like a flash, like lightning. He sees a rotating magnetic field. He sees how current can change direction and still create motion. He sees a system that will one day change the entire world. And in that moment, he realizes he is not going insane. He is discovering the future. Ideas are worth nothing until the world accepts them. Nikola Tesla understood this, but he had not yet learned how cruel the world could be. He arrives in America with a few coins in his pocket, a suitcase full of knowledge, and an idea that would one day reshape the planet. And almost immediately, he finds himself working near a man who already represents progress itself. Thomas Edison. Edison is action, noise, laboratories, money, patents. Tesla is silence, mental calculation, visions of the future. They are too different not to collide. At first, it looks like an opportunity. Tesla begins working for Edison's company. He has promised improvements, recognition, and payment for optimizing direct current systems. He works without stopping. Night after night, he improves designs, increases efficiency, solves problems considered impossible. And then he hears a promise. If he completes the task, he will be rewarded, a significant sum of money. For him, it's not just money, it's freedom, a chance to continue his research. He completes the work and waits, but the reward never comes. When he asks, Edison responds as if it were a joke, saying he doesn't understand American humor. In that moment, something breaks, not in the machines, inside him. He leaves, without money, without support, but with one realization: the world does not reward ideas. It protects those who already control them. This is the first betrayal of his life, but not the last. He remains in New York, without resources, without a team, but with an idea that now becomes an obsession, alternating current. And if before it was just a thought, now it becomes a mission. He works under any conditions: cheap rooms, odd jobs, sometimes digging trenches just to survive. And all the while, inside his mind, a system is forming, unseen by anyone else. A model of the world where energy flows differently, where machines become more efficient, where electricity stops being dangerous and becomes accessible to everyone. But he needs a chance, and that chance is coming, because one day he will meet a man who believes in him, and a war will begin that changes civilization itself. Sometimes scientific ideas don't stay in laboratories. They enter the world and become weapons. Nikola Tesla already understood that alternating current was not just theory, it was the future. But every future has enemies, and the biggest one was Thomas Edison. Edison defended direct current. He had invested money, reputation, his entire legacy into it. And now any alternative wasn't just a mistake, it was a threat. And so begins what would later be called the War of Currents. This is no longer a scientific disagreement. It is a battle over how the entire world will be powered. Edison uses everything he has: influence, media, fear. He claims alternating current is dangerous, that it kills, that it cannot be controlled. And to prove it, he goes to extremes: public demonstrations, animals, shocking experiments. Newspapers spread fear. People become afraid of electricity itself. But Tesla does not step back. He understands truth does not win through noise. It wins through results. And at this moment, someone enters his life who changes everything: George Westinghouse. Westinghouse sees what others refuse to see. Alternating current can travel long distances, cheaper, more efficient, scalable. He offers Tesla a partnership, not just support, but a chance to change the entire energy system of the world. And Tesla agrees. Now it is no longer a lone genius against the system. It is a team against an empire. But the fight becomes more brutal. Edison tries to manipulate public opinion, to make people fear the new technology. He even supports demonstrations designed to prove its danger, using public electrocution of animals. This is no longer science. It is psychological warfare. But Tesla responds differently. He steps onto the stage and shows the opposite. He passes electricity through his own body and survives. He lights bulbs wirelessly from a distance. He demonstrates that energy can be safe. And in that moment, something shifts. People begin to realize they are not being shown facts. They are being shown fear. And slowly the world begins to turn toward alternating current. But the greatest victory is still ahead. Because ahead lies a project that can no longer be explained as simple engineering. It is an attempt to reshape the very nature of energy itself. After winning the war of currents, the world finally began to admit it. Nikola Tesla had been right. But for him, it wasn't a victory, it was just a step. Because he was already looking far beyond electricity itself. He began asking a question no one else even dared to form. Can energy be transmitted without wires? At the time, it sounded almost insane. Electricity meant wires, stations, infrastructure. That was the accepted truth. But Tesla thought differently. If radio waves can carry signals, why can't energy be transmitted the same way? And so he begins working on a project that would become legendary, the Wardenclyffe Tower. It is not just a laboratory, it is an attempt to reshape the world itself, a massive tower designed to transmit electricity through the earth. No wires, no limits, no electricity bills, a world where power is available to every human being on the planet. He believed the earth itself could act as a conductor, and that energy is not a commodity, but a universal right of humanity. But the further he progressed, the more the world around him began to shift against him. Funding becomes unstable. Investors start asking questions. And the most important one is simple. Where is the profit? Tesla does not answer with money. He answers with the future. But the future cannot pay for construction. And slowly, the project begins to collapse. The Wardenclyffe Tower turns from a symbol of progress into a symbol of an unfinished dream. He tries to explain that this is not just an experiment, it is a new era. But people stop understanding him. And eventually, everything stops. Work ends. Funding disappears. The tower remains, standing like a giant staring into the sky. And then something worse happens. Not the failure of the project, but the collapse of the world's belief in him. Tesla is left alone, with ideas he still sees as clearly as on day one. But now he has no resources, no team, no support. Only the future he still holds in his mind, and that no one else wants to build. Sometimes the greatest ideas do not die suddenly. They simply, slowly disappear from the world. After the Wardenclyffe project was halted, Nikola Tesla tried for a long time to convince people that his work was not finished. But no one was listening anymore. Public interest faded. Investors left. A name that once symbolized the future slowly turned into silence. The tower that once promised to change the planet now stood abandoned, like a monument to something no one believed in anymore. Tesla tried to keep working. He returned to ideas, experiments, new theories. But the world around him had changed. Now what mattered was not ideas, but profit. And in this new reality, there was no place for him. He moved more often. Fewer laboratories, less equipment, fewer people around him, and more loneliness. His mind still worked at the same speed as before. He still saw machines that did not exist. He still mentally built systems of the future. But now those systems remained only in his head. Sometimes he published ideas. Sometimes he wrote articles. Sometimes he gave interviews. But fewer and fewer people took him seriously. He became a man everyone knew, but fewer and fewer people listened to. And slowly, the quietest part of his life began. No breakthroughs, no laboratories, no triumphs, only rooms, hotels, moves from place to place, and pigeons. Yes, pigeons became his only constant connection to the world. He fed them, watched them, sometimes said he understood them better than humans. It sounds strange, but it makes sense for a man who spent too long living inside his own mind. The world stopped understanding him, and he stopped trying to explain himself to the world. And at some point it becomes clear, Tesla's greatest invention was not a machine or a system, but his ability to keep thinking when no one expected him to anymore. He is still a genius, but now in a world that moved on without him. In the final years of his life, Nikola Tesla was no longer at the center of history. He still lived in New York, but it was a different world now, a world that had stopped noticing him. Hotel rooms changed constantly, addresses became temporary, and only one thing remained constant: his mind. He kept thinking, even when no one expected new ideas from him anymore. Sometimes he shared thoughts with journalists, spoke about future technologies, wireless energy, systems that could connect the entire world. And every time it sounded like science fiction. But the problem was not that he was wrong. The problem was that he no longer lived in the future. He lived too far ahead of it. Society had already changed. New names appeared, new inventors, new scientific heroes. And he slowly became a legend everyone knew, but few ever verified. And in this silence, a strange part of his life emerged. Pigeons. He fed them every day, recognized individual birds, spoke of a white pigeon as something special. He cared for it as if it were the only being that understood him without words. To others, it seemed odd, but to him, it was the only stability left in a world that no longer made sense. He grew older, his body weakened, but his mind remained sharp until the very end. He still saw solutions where others saw chaos. And yet fewer and fewer people came to him for answers, because the answers he gave belonged to the future, while the world still lived in the present. And when his life ended in 1943, it happened quietly, without noise, without recognition, without final triumph. Just the end of a man who spent his life trying to bring light into the world. The irony is that only after his death did the world begin to understand what it had lost. His ideas became the foundation of future technologies. His concepts were realized decades later. His name returned as a symbol. But the most important realization came later. He was not just inventing devices. He was seeing the structure of the world before it existed. And perhaps that is why he was so often misunderstood. Because he did not live in his time, he lived in our future.